Late at night, a phone rings. A woman picks up. On the other end is a man who is scared. Scared of something she told him just days earlier. He's recording the call, and what she says next is so cold, so calm, that it will end up in a courtroom as one of the most chilling pieces of evidence anyone has ever heard. "I could never hurt a fly," she says. Then she says something about the man she killed that will make your skin crawl. Stick with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to hear that phone call for yourself. But first, let's rewind, because to understand how a mother of three ended up here, we need to go back to when everything looked perfect. This is the story of Matthew Johnson, a decorated Green Beret and father of three, who vanished from his $1 million home in Utah in September 2024. And it's the story of his wife, Jennifer Gledhill, who police say knew exactly where he was, because she put him there. Hey everyone, welcome back. If this is your first time here, we cover real cases, the ones that leave a whole community asking, how did nobody see this coming? This one is exactly that kind of case. Let's get into it. On the outside, the Johnson-Gledhill family looked like something out of a magazine. They lived in Cottonwood Heights, Utah, in a home worth well over $1 million. Matthew, 51, was a Green Beret with the Utah National Guard's 19th Special Forces Group, a soldier with more than a decade of honorable service. The people who worked with him described him as sharp, dependable, the kind of guy you could call at 2 a.m. and he'd have an answer. Jennifer, 42, was seen by friends as the quiet one, a devoted mom, a homebody, someone who stayed in the background while Matthew served his country. Together they were raising 3 kids, 11, 7, and 5 years old. Would you have guessed anything was wrong here? Because almost nobody who knew this family did. But behind closed doors, this marriage had been falling apart for a long time. By July 2024, Matthew and Jennifer were already talking about divorce. And a month later, in August, Jennifer did something that would later come back to haunt the entire case. She went to court and asked for a protective order against her husband. She said she needed protection from him. Here's where it gets interesting. When the case went in front of a judge, 3rd District Commissioner Russell Minus, he actually watched the videos Jennifer submitted as evidence of abuse. And what he saw wasn't a scared, timid woman. He said the footage showed Jennifer just as confrontational and unafraid as she claimed Matthew was. He also read through her text messages to Matthew, and instead of finding fear, he found messages that berated, belittled, and, in his words, seemed almost designed to provoke Matthew into reacting. So on September 16th, 2024, just 5 days before Matthew would be killed, the commissioner threw out the protective order. He wrote that this wasn't a case of abuse. It was, in his words, a highly dysfunctional marriage bringing out the worst in the parties. And he said plainly that a divorce should have been filed long before things got this bad. Now think about that for a second. A judge looked at this exact couple just days before the murder and basically said, these two need to separate, now. He had no idea how right, and how late, that warning really was. Because what the commissioner didn't know is that Jennifer had already decided how this marriage was going to end. And it wasn't with paperwork. In the weeks before he died, people close to Matthew noticed he wasn't sleeping at home anymore. He was staying at a National Guard facility instead, and friends say it was because he didn't feel safe in his own house. One of his closest friends, a retired guardsman named Kevin Thompson, said Matthew had finally made peace with the idea. It was time to get divorced and move on with his life. But Matthew didn't know the full truth. Jennifer was having an affair. And it wasn't just a fling. It was intense, consuming. The kind of relationship where she was already picturing a future that didn't include her husband. Here's a detail that seems small, until you know what came next. On September 19th, just 2 days before Matthew was killed, Jennifer showed her boyfriend a gun, a loaded Glock 19X that she kept at home. At the time, he probably didn't think much of it. Plenty of military families keep guns in the house. But prosecutors later said this wasn't random. Jennifer had also arranged for all 3 of her kids to spend that final night at her parents' house. Why would a mother send her children away on a random Friday night, unless she already knew what she was planning to do? Before we go further into what happened that night, if you're new here, hit subscribe, because we post cases like this every week. And if this story already has you hooked, drop a comment below and let me know. Do you think Jennifer planned this from the very beginning, or do you think it happened in the heat of the moment? I want to hear your theory before the evidence tells us the answer. Now, let's go back to September 20th, the last day Matthew Johnson was alive. September 20th, 2024 started like any other day. Nobody could have known it would be Matthew's last. By that evening, Matthew had found out about the affair. Neighbors later told police they heard a loud, heated argument coming from the house. According to what Jennifer would later admit, Matthew was furious. He knew she'd been sleeping with someone else, and years of built-up resentment finally exploded into one final fight. Eventually, the house went quiet. Matthew went to bed in the master bedroom, completely unaware of what was coming. In the early hours of September 21st, while Matthew was asleep, Jennifer picked up his own 9mm handgun and shot him in the head. Let that sink in for a second. Not in a moment of panic, not in self-defense. While he was sleeping, what Jennifer did next is honestly hard to process. By her own later confession, she put Matthew's body into a rooftop storage container and slid it down the stairs of their home. She loaded it into their minivan. She smashed his phone so it couldn't be tracked. Then she drove his truck to a different neighborhood and abandoned it, blocks away, trying to make it look like he'd disappeared on his own. After that, she drove north and buried her husband's body somewhere that, to this day, has never been found. Then she went home and started cleaning. She bleached the walls. She scrubbed the carpet. She ordered a brand new mattress to replace the one soaked in her husband's blood. And it arrived just 2 days later, like nothing had happened. For one full day, Jennifer Gledhill walked around knowing exactly where her husband's body was, while everyone else in his life had no idea he was even gone. Here's the thing about people who commit the perfect crime. They almost always tell someone. And Jennifer told her boyfriend. On September 22nd, just before midnight, barely a day after the murder, Jennifer showed up at his home and confessed everything. How she killed Matthew, how she got rid of the body, how she cleaned the crime scene. He even noticed bruises on her, and when he asked, she casually said she got them while burying her husband. Can you imagine being on the other end of that conversation? Finding out the person you're involved with just confessed to murder and said it like she was describing a bad day at work. Her boyfriend was terrified, and that fear is exactly what led him to do something that would eventually bring this whole thing crashing down. He started recording her. This is the recording that opened our video. When Jennifer's boyfriend told her he was scared of what she'd told him, this was her response. I could never hurt a fly. He's not a person. He wasn't a person anymore. He wasn't Matt. Read that again. She had convinced herself that the man she married, the father of her 3 kids, simply stopped being a person the moment she decided to kill him. And it gets darker. When he asked if she'd be afraid if the roles were reversed, she said, "Not if I deserved it." She then told him she used to joke about being like the Queen of Hearts, someone who wanted to round up people she saw as bad and get rid of them, so she could, in her words, ship-shape this country back to a good place. She also asked him not to think of her as a monster, not to forget who she was before all this. Here's what makes this even more disturbing. This entire conversation happened before Matthew was even reported missing. Jennifer was already talking about her husband in the past tense, while the rest of the world still thought he was just gone for a few days. What would you have done if you were her boyfriend, holding evidence like that? Would you have gone straight to the police? Or would fear have made you hesitate too? 6 days after that phone call, on September 28th, Jennifer finally reported Matthew missing. Her story was that he told her he needed space for a week and asked her not to call him, but the Utah National Guard already knew something was wrong. Matthew had missed duty on September 23rd, and that had never happened in his career. Meanwhile, Jennifer's boyfriend had been quietly building a case against her, screenshots of their texts, and that recorded phone call. On October 2nd, he finally brought everything to the police. When investigators searched the Johnson-Gledhill home, the story fell apart instantly. Under the bed in the master bedroom, they found a large blood stain soaked into the carpet. There was blood on the bed frame. The whole house reeked of bleach. And that brand new mattress? Records showed Jennifer ordered it, just 3 days after the murder. Police also pulled GPS data from her phone. It showed her driving to exactly where Matthew's truck was abandoned around 6 a.m. that morning, and later, tracking her route north toward Davis County, the same area where she told her boyfriend she'd buried him. On October 2nd, 2024, Jennifer Gledhill was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and obstruction of justice. But she wasn't the only one. On October 24th, her parents, Thomas, 71, and Rosalie, 67, were also arrested, charged with obstruction of justice. Police found out the couple had spent over 5 hours at Jennifer's house in the days after the murder, even though they'd first claimed they were only there for less than an hour. It got worse. Investigators discovered Rosalie was the one who'd actually purchased the new mattress, and that she'd had her phone remotely wiped, erasing any record of where she'd been during the cleanup. When police asked Thomas about the master bedroom, he told them, "I did not go in where the incident happened." A strange thing to say, if he didn't already know exactly what had happened there. During a search of the parents' home, police found something chilling: a gun box for a Glock 19X, wrapped inside a child's onesie, hidden in a plastic tote near Jennifer's old bedroom, the same type of gun she'd shown her boyfriend just 2 days before the murder. A family that once broke bread together was now unraveling one lie at a time. Here's the part of this story that still isn't finished. Matthew Johnson's body has never been found. Search teams have covered multiple counties across northern Utah, from Davis and Weber counties all the way up near the Idaho border. Over 70 people have taken part in the search. Police, volunteers, and even Matthew's own military brothers, who've organized search parties of their own. His friend Kevin Thompson said the search being in its 5th month is the kind of thing that keeps him up at night. Another close friend, John Hash, who served alongside Matthew for 12 years, put it simply. He'd had Jennifer in his own home, sharing meals with his family, and finding out she was responsible for his friend's death was, in his words, shocking, frankly. At one court hearing, prosecutors revealed something new. A storage container, the kind used to move the body, was found floating in water, and it tested positive for Matthew's blood. More evidence. Still no answers about where he actually is. Jennifer Gledhill has pleaded not guilty to everything: first-degree murder, 5 counts of obstruction of justice, possession of a controlled substance, abuse of a human body, and tampering with a witness. At her bail hearing, prosecutors argued she was too dangerous to release. They revealed she had told her boyfriend that she'd shoot herself before ever going to jail. The judge agreed she was a risk to the community and denied her bail. She remains in custody at the Salt Lake County Jail. There's also a $500,000 life insurance policy on Matthew, with Jennifer listed as the beneficiary. With her facing murder charges and Matthew's body still missing, the insurance company has asked the court to decide who's actually entitled to that money. Quick note: trial dates in cases like this can shift, so if you're watching this later, it's worth checking for the most current update. As of this recording, her trial was expected to move forward and last around 8 days. At the center of all of this are 3 children, 11, 7, and 5 years old, who have now lost both parents, one to murder, one to prison. Matthew's family released a statement that's honestly hard to read. They said they're hopeful that Matthew will be found soon, or that Jennifer, or someone, will finally come forward with the location of his body, so they can lay him to rest properly. The theory prosecutors have laid out is simple, even if it's hard to accept. Jennifer killed her husband because he found out about her affair, and murder felt easier to her than a divorce, a custody battle, or losing the man she was really in love with. So here's the question I want to leave you with. How does a mother of 3 convince herself that this was the answer? That the man who fathered her children wasn't a person anymore? Maybe we'll never really understand it. What we do know is that somewhere in northern Utah, a father and a soldier is still out there, in a grave nobody has found, waiting for someone to finally tell the truth about where he is. If you want to see us cover another case like this, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Estimated runtime at natural pacing, 19-21 minutes.